Okay, welcome everyone. I'll call this meeting to order. And I'd like to get confirmation of the agenda from council. Can I get a mover and seconder? Sherry and Rob, any discussion? All in favor? That's carried, thank you. I'm not looking for a motion initially. Any conflicts of pecuniary interest? None declared. The purpose of the meeting is to receive update regarding the council's decision regarding a potential, looking at the wrong, there we go. Yeah, the purpose of the meeting is to seek public input on farmland protection. We have already had one public meeting on the subject and received input, but the meeting time frame was not long enough for everyone to get a chance to speak. So we thought this evening we'd devote an entire meeting to the subject. And initially, we'd like to hear from people who didn't speak at the previous public meeting on the subject. And after that, we'll hear from people who have registered to speak, and their names do appear on the meeting agenda. So is there anyone from the audience who would like to address council on the subject that hasn't already registered to speak? You don't have to speak at this time. Gail, you are registered to speak. No, but you're. That doesn't mean you can't speak after the registered presenters do. Yes, sir. Yeah, come on up and have a seat and activate the microphone. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, no, you don't have to register for that. Yeah, no, that's fine. No, it's an open meeting, and after the people who've already signed on to speak have their say, and there's a bit of back and forth. If you have something you want to add, then all you have to do is raise your hand. Okay. All right. In that case, we'll move on to the first registered presenter, and that's Andy Dillon. Andy, are you present? You are. Come on up to the table and press a silver button that activates the microphone. Just introduce yourself and where you live, and the floor is yours.
Okay. Thank you, Reeve Wise and Council, for giving me the opportunity to voice my concerns on the proposed restrictions on Class 1 to 3 soils. My name is Andy Dillon. I live at 123 McQuay Road, and I'm Chief Building Official of Central Frontenac Township. I'm here tonight to let you know that I'm strongly opposed to any additional restrictions being imposed on Class 1 to 3 soils in stone mills. I know I'm not alone in my concerns. If you're not hearing as much opposition from other landowners, it's because they're unaware of the proposal, or they feel like council will do what they want anyways. The majority of people that participate in your meetings are people that want answers, want permission for something, or want you to change something. Most people are too busy and are not concerned with township business. The only reason I knew this was happening is, as a municipal employee, I like to see how other municipalities deal with similar issues at their meetings. I would like to share my experience that I had building a home in stone mills. Back in the early 2000s, my wife and I were thinking about building a house. My wife's parents, Don and Joyce McClellan, had a small farm and offered us a building lot. Where better to start a family than on a small farm close to relatives? We met with township staff. There were no issues identified with our proposal. We were busy, money was tight. It was a few years before we were in a place where we were ready to proceed. We submitted our application, attended the Committee of Adjustment meeting. It was at that meeting we were informed that the provincial policy statement had changed 2 weeks before, and severances were no longer permitted on prime agricultural land. I'm sure the province had public meetings and provided public notices, but nobody informed the individual property owners until it was too late. We were not alone. Other landowners that had plans for severances for a variety of reasons were told it is not possible. Township staff asked us to be patient and that things would change due to how many people were affected by this restrictive policy. Roughly 10 years later, after the township hired qualified professionals, conducted studies, held public meetings, much like this one, the land was rezoned from prime ag to rural. We were granted our severance, built our house, but by this time, Don had passed away, the livestock were gone, our kids were teenagers. So much for raising a family on the farm. The next generation of farmer was lost due to restrictive government land use policies designed to protect farmland. This is just one example of how excessive restrictions can have unintended consequences. Another reason I'm opposed to the proposal is the fact that we are in a housing crisis. We don't have enough homes, and the ones on the market are not affordable. Try to find a single detached dwelling on less than 3 acres of land in Stone Mills. They are few and far between. There are more properties available to purchase that consist of larger parcels of vacant land and farms with houses on them for sale in this township. I would argue we don't have a shortage of farmland. We have a shortage of farmers to farm it. Nature is reclaiming more farmland in this township every day. More restrictive regulations take resources to implement. There's an ongoing cost to taxpayers for enforcement, and the cost of time, money, and frustration to the applicants. All these costs drive up the price of a new home in Stone Mills. Limiting the available land for development will drive up the cost of the land that is left available. An adequate supply of affordable housing is a basic human right, and now is not a good time to restrict development. Another reason I'm opposed to the proposal is that all levels of government are continuously eroding landowners' rights and property values. There was a time when the federal government's Canadian Bill of Rights protected, and this is quoting it, the right of the individual to life, liberty, security of person, and the enjoyment of property, and the right not to be deprived thereof except by due process of law. When the current Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedoms was enacted, they deliberately omitted the enjoyment of property clause. The new capital gains tax is not going to help housing or farmers. If you own multiple properties that are underutilized, there is no incentive to sell it to someone who could use it, when 2/3 of the profit is going to be taxed. Excessive government regulation doesn't benefit the citizens, it only creates more government. The province keeps flip-flopping on their land use policies to the point where we can't keep up with the changes and we don't know what's coming next. The provincial policies are focused mainly on urban property issues and don't always reflect best land use policies for rural areas. I'm not all about development. The ongoing expropriation of farmland for development in Wilmot is a disgrace. If it was anyone other than government taking the land by force, it would be considered extortion. Changing the policies for the green belt was also an embarrassment. All levels of government need to step back and stop trying to control private property. We need stable land use policies with less restrictions to ensure long-term prosperity. Some other things to consider before imposing these restrictive land use policies. If a person invested their time and money into a property and suddenly the rules changed and they could no longer use it for what it was intended, there should be compensation. The policymakers may not have a cent invested related to the recommendations they make. Most residents are unaware of the proposed restrictions and will not realize they've been affected until it's too late. Public consultation is not enough. You need to mail a letter with your proposal to each individual property owner affected. These maps you have are painted with a broad brush. There is a large percentage of marginal farmland included in these areas. Most of the class 1 to 3 soils mapped is near settlement areas where the province also wants you to direct development. If you implement these restrictions, the onus is placed on the applicant to demonstrate the proposal is acceptable. Usually a consultant is required to justify the application, and that adds significant costs. Excessive regulation always impacts the less fortunate the most. Small family-run farms may be forced out of business. They may be unable to sell that piece of marginal land to survive an economic downturn or to replace a piece of necessary equipment. Larger corporations will be able to buy up their farmland at a reduced price due to the unreasonable land use constraints. I feel a person who owns and maintains their property would be the best one to decide what the best use of their land is. Any further restrictions will adversely affect the residents of Stone Mills, and continuing with these proposed amendments is an unnecessary use of tax dollars. The policies you already have in place provide a good balance of uses in the rural zone with more than enough restrictions. You already limit the number of severances. Subdivisions have a separate process with extensive public consultation. Minimum distance separation protects existing farms. You have protections for wetlands, endangered species, and increased setbacks for other non-compatible uses. You need to remember that when by that regulation, restrictive land use policy should not be taken lightly by decision makers like yourselves. And I ask that council use their best judgment and don't let NIMBYism influence this important decision. And that's all I've got to say about that.
Thanks very much, Andy. I forgot to mention ahead of your presentation that I'm hoping people can limit it to about the length that Andy did. That's about 10 minutes. Given the number of speakers that we have, that will use up probably at least the first hour. You can have a second chance to speak after that time. I just want to make sure we get everybody in a reasonable time, and then we can sort of go around the circle again. And if council doesn't mind, unless you think it's urgent, I want to hear from everyone. Then, council can ask questions and have discussions if that's agreeable. Okay. Thanks very much, Andy.
Thank you.
So the next speaker we have listed is Wayne Goodyear. Wayne, you know the routine.
Good afternoon. Okay. A little bit of quick context. None of the people in the group that is scheduled to speak after me in our group chose this as use for the last 6 months in our lives. I can guarantee you. There are a lot of things we'd have rather been doing, and it came from just a series of surprising events. Mr. Nyborg is not a bad guy. He's a man who invests in land that was zoned rural and just happens to be remarkable farmland. So seeing the wells being drilled alerted people and alarmed them. We went to a committee of adjustment meeting at which two people that I've known for more than 40 years both made remarkable statements. One statement came from Mr. Clancy, and he said that there was no future for agriculture in Stone Mills, and he's chairing that committee. And the other came from Bob Sargent, who I've known for a long time, and Bob looked really, really constrained by saying, we have no choice. It was really upsetting to watch that, yes, it's very good soil. Yes, it's on a recharge zone. Yes, it's on below a discharge zone. Yes, it's formally protected for wetlands, but not now. And there's nothing we can do about it. So that's what triggered our interest. And so we wanted to figure out, how did we get here? And so that led to us submitting a Freedom of Information request. And that was filled and done remarkably. Brandy Teeple did an amazing job, seriously. And if you've never seen one, it's enough to put you in the asylum, because you You've got to sequence things by order and mention of a topic, etc. So hats off, a big, big help to at least get the same base. That's why we ask that everybody have access to that information. It's not for us, it's for everybody. And that will help trigger some memories for people who were on staff at that time. It's a big help to go back, because then you can put it in context. Oh yeah, that was going on when, and then you can add that information to the pool. All right, so then there's a big summary of that freedom of information. And this is a smaller summary of one part of it that I'll be reading. And that's what I'm going to do now. Okay. All right, it's a summary on the report on the 2006 survey of landowner opinions. So I'm just trying to look at the survey that was done, because it took on so much weight and importance decades later. It made it sound as though it was more than it actually was. The following is a summary of a report prepared by Wayne Goodyear, Stephanie Brohosky, Jacob Ellens, Jason Donaldson, Tracy Finn, and Edward Embry. Farmers and residents are concerned with how a majority of Stone Mills prime agricultural land has in fact been rezoned rural and is open to unbridled development. The report is based on information provided through the Freedom of Information request submitted in May 2024 by Stephanie Brohosky. The 6-page report and supporting documents.
Hang on a sec, Wayne. Ed, there's a concern? Sure.
No, he never said sorry before. Thanks, sir. A 6-page report and supporting documents have been submitted to council and staffs, so you've already had that. Upon the advice of the resolutions officer at the Provincial Ombudsman's Office of the Ministry of Municipal Affairs and Housing, a full report will be sent to the minister. That was on her request. Background. In 2004, the provincial policy statement removed the right of landowners to sever retirement lots. That's what Mr. Dillon referred to. And that is the beginning of the entire discussion. An arbitrary decision, absolutely, and a decision that was based on mapping and land designations that are very complicated and highly suspect in many cases. So many of Mr. Dillon's points are accurate. Okay, there are places where that land wasn't what it was designated as. Okay, the survey itself. June 13th, 2006, the Committee of Adjustment held an agricultural areas classification review, public meeting and workshop to review the PA designation and possible changes. They were motivated to try and do what they could to reverse this PPS action, removing retirement lots. Mr. Ray Valitis, representative of the Ontario Minister of Agriculture and Rural Affairs, explained that PA consists of areas of class 1 to 3 soils or areas of class 4 soils where substantial capital investments have been made for farming, and advised that any questionnaire should include maps. Soil Classification Review Committee, made up of basically it was the Committee of Adjustment plus a rep from council, designed a questionnaire with no information on soil classes and no maps. Things were mentioned at a workshop, but weren't included in the distributed survey. 3 false narratives arose from that survey. First, that the survey polled a majority of farmers. This is false. It did not. Mr. Gregory Bender, an employee of Mr. Tunnick, the planner at the time, wrote that a majority of farmers had been polled. No, to be polled means that the landowner has responded. 48 responses on parcels from 34 owners were received, and that's a response rate of 17%. And 60% of those, 2/3 of those, reported on an average of less than 99 acres. So this was not a large-scale operation. It was limited but detailed, and the people who did it were very dedicated in trying to fill them out. Not responding. 24 major landowners owning between 560 to 1,119 acres, and that's from StatsCan 2006 census. They did not respond. The majority of farmers in Stone Mills as a full township did not respond. The vast majority of the owners of the 23,000 acres that were designated according to the mapping to be PA. We're not saying they are PA, but that's what was on the maps. The majority of farmers in Stone Mills Township, in fact, were not polled, were not surveyed. Number 2, misconceptions or false narratives. That the survey was valid in representing the wishes of the landowners to eliminate all designation of farmland. This is also false. The survey did not ask respondents if they wanted all PA designations removed. Landowners wanted PA designation removed from less than a total of 5,000 acres that they were that they owned. 28 respondents wanted PA removed from their land, and they wanted it removed in most cases overwhelmingly from patches, from parcels. In some cases, 20%, in some cases, 40%, but it's not all of their land, and that's part of the part. Why are we designated PA when in fact only part of it qualifies? One of those issues. 9 respondents chose to retain their own PA designations on one or more of their parcels. Landowners wishing to retain their PA designation were completely ignored. 2 farmers in the Moscow area did later make a successful delegation to council to retain their PA designation. The result was the sole PA area retained in Stone Mills Township, and that's the Moscow block, they call it. The opportunity to appeal the loss of PA designation was not made available to any other farmers who wished to retain their PA designations. And the third misconception was that the majority of landowner comments, according to Mr. Bender, dealt with a new PPS not allowing severances on PA. In other words, that this was a statement in the survey of their opposition to this arbitrary government move, okay? And this is also not so. There were only 2 responses that mentioned the PPS restrictions at all, that of Mr. Clancy and that of his daughter and son-in-law. Mr. Clancy favored removing the designation of PA as a universal principle throughout the township, while the majority of respondents were concerned with their particular farm and that it had not been correctly classified. Limitations of the documents from the Freedom of Information request. No documentation exists so far to show that Mr. Velitis, his other requirements for changing the designation of prime ag to rural were actually followed. He asked also for an application of soils classification to all lands and for site visitations by qualified professional agronomists. No documentation of the number of farms that were visited and the results of consultations between Mr. Velitis and Mr. Tunick, the planner for the township at the time, or the comments from the township landowners, OMAFRA, and the local agricultural committee. Those things are simply not part of what Brandy's been able to find. Conclusions. Our main conclusion that rural zoning was introduced by 2 sleights of hand. The first occurred when Mr. Clancy opposed the 2004 PPS, which removed the retirement lots options on PA lands. He and the Soil Classifications Committee distributed a questionnaire in 2006 to a group of farmers who conscientiously pointed out the incorrect zoning of their particular farms. The errors were not corrected, and the comments were falsely interpreted as farmers wanting to remove all PA soil classifications from the township, which is not the case. The second sleight of hand occurred when council dropped the 2000 map, the map that's the schedule in the 2000 OP, designating PA areas and approved a new land use map for the 2010 official plan. This removed all PA zoning except for the Moscow block that was created as a result of an appeal, their delegation. The 2010 OP and the subsequent OP land use schedules are in non-compliance with the PPS requirement that all class 1, 2, 3 soils be zoned PA and thus protected. So it's a zoning issue. Clear language from the PPS and 2 professional planners, Mr. Kevin Duguay, KMD Consulting, and Mr. John Turvey, OMAFRA, confirm that PA designation cannot in fact be changed without direct appeal to MMAH and OMAFRA. Mr. Clancy became a main advocate for the removal of prime agricultural designation, and I think Mr. Dillon's presentation made clear what would have motivated him to do so. More background information is needed from Reeve John Wise, who was involved in the approval process since 2007, Deputy Reeve Doug Davison, and COA Chair Bob Clancy, who were both involved since 2005. And that's not in any way an aggressive move against those people. It's that if they can get the FOI information in front of them, it'll be like asking me, Wayne, what took place in 2004 in your classroom or in your staff that person got fired or this person. Are you kidding? So I fully understand. If you get a chance to look at the FOI data, it may trigger other remembrances that may clear things up. Okay? And I'm finished. I'm finished.
You're finished, okay. Good.
De-designation of prime ag lands has led to inflation of land prices and the development of high-risk and development on high-risk areas and vulnerable aquifers. And the last statement is Stone Mills urgently needs a comprehensive development plan, not just a plan to handle where the farmland is, but to deal with our other issues that are outstanding that are not bylaw regulations that are just language in our OP. Thank you very much, folks.
Thanks, Wayne. Next speaker listed is Edward Embry.
Okay, everybody hear me? So thank you, Reeve, Wise and Council for another chance of talking to you tonight. My talk tonight is about planting seeds. The most important requirement for any farmer is planting seeds that grow into a harvest. My Uncle Douglas Embry said, you have to be successful in planting seeds if you're going to be a farmer. Those were very wise words of my uncle that I pass along to this council tonight. But planting seeds is not just God's fertile ground, it's by word of mouth also. I've been planting seeds in the information I've given this council for the protection of our agricultural land we call prime ag here in Stone Mills. What I have seen is very little reaction by this council to all the diligent work of seeds I have planted in our ag committees, work so far. And as you know, I've given out all this information to use to look at in my last delegation. Our committee has been working very diligently to unfold the past and transform the future. You have learned from our committee's executive summary that the unwarranted and unlawful removal of prime farmland was a reflection of very terrible planning decisions. And the summary you have been given is just the beginning of our findings. But what I am most worried about is that yourselves, council, do not fully understand what has transpired concerning those very worrisome planning decisions and what possible dire outcomes may unfold from them. And you also do not understand the function of Ontario's farm land policies and how they must be placed in the official plan document. And therefore, to that end, it is going to be challenging to come to proper decisions unless you reach out to someone with further understanding than who you have currently on retainer. So far, council has spent a huge amount of taxpayers' money with nothing to show for it. Therefore, I believe it's time to work with those that have a stake in agriculture in our township. Those shareholders would be our committee and the three farm groups that farmers are registered to in order to be recognized a farm entity, being OFA, CFFO, and NFU. All three of these organizations support the saving of our prime agriculture farmlands for future generations in our township. As I've said before, the most productive type of agriculture community is one where there is certainty that the land will remain in farm production and the municipal government will support agriculture. Therefore, due diligence on your behalf is of prime importance to move forward. Again, I leave my door and our committee's door fully open for dialogue to move forward, and I'm looking forward to your comments. Next, I would like to bring to your attention some findings from the 2010 official plan dated November 30th, 2010. My research was to interpret what changes were made from the 2000 official plan to the 2010 official plan and how they were implemented. Here are the highlights of my research of the 2010 official plan. 1.1. It states the plan utilizes words or terms defined in the provincial policy statement of March 2005. These definitions shall apply in the interpretation of the policies. This plan and their application to development proposals and planning applications. These terms are shown as italicized bold script in the plan. According to the above statement, the plan was to utilize the provincial policy statement of March 2005. We know that is a false claim concerning primary cultures lands in the township. 1.1, where reference is made in this plan to original document, which provides more accurate information in the interpretation of this plan, reference shall be made to the original document where necessary in implementing the policy of this plan. Interpretation of this statement suggests that the 2000 official plan is a document that still guides policies in the 2010 official plan. Is then all the 2000 prime ag land still in enforcement? It seems so. 1.4. A 5-year review was conducted from July 2006 to February 2010. Activities during the review included a soil classification review with the assistance of the Ministry of Agriculture, Food and Rural Affairs to assess the appropriateness of the designation of prime agricultural lands. Where is the soil classification review completed by OMAFRA? 4.3.2. It is intent of this plan to preserve prime agricultural lands in order to ensure its availability on a long-term basis by protecting it from incompatible use. We know this is a false statement. 4.32 Agriculture, MMAH, November 30th, 2000. The placement of the MMAH, November 30th, 2000, beside the agriculture components of the 2010 official plan is concerning. Interpretation of this is as follows. MNH refers to the Ministry of Municipal Affairs and Housing, and the date November 30th, 2000 is the date of the passing of the 2010 official plan. There is nowhere else in the 2010 official plan than MAH November 30th, 2000 appears. Therefore, legal interpretation can only mean that 1.1 of the 2010 official plan is the true guiding principle. Again, it states, reference shall be made to the original document where necessary in implementing the policies of this plan. Therefore, the 2000 official plan was still the guiding document or document guiding prime agricultural lands in the township of Stone Mills after 2010 official plan was implemented. Prime agricultural lands was still in bylaw 2000-85 was repealed by 2000-74. Therefore, council has a hell of a problem to solve. Finally, I would like to address the proposed official plan and zoning amendment for the purpose of protecting prime agricultural lands in the township of Stone Mills. Looking at the policies described in the amendment, I find they lack sufficient wording in this description of necessary provisions for the protection of prime agricultural lands. Terms such as these within the proposed policy are not conducive of strong policy outlook. Assess the merits of the proposed development as demonstrate to the satisfaction of township staff. The township will assess whether other locations exist, may also be required. Township may require mitigation measures. Therefore, the proposed bylaw does not foster criteria that would be successful in the protection of the township's prime farmlands and cannot be supported of the farm agriculture groups whatsoever. Our committee offers a draft proposal called the Prime Land Protection Bylaw. As you will soon learn by the guiding principles it fosters to preserve and protect the prime farmland here in our township until such time that a LEAR study can be completed. One of the key measures of the draft proposal is to reinstate the map, which is here, of Schedule 1 of the prime land that was abruptly removed from the bylaw number 2000-85 Camden East portion of the official plan of 2010. Two Ontario land planners have stated the following in support of the above proposal. Kevin Duguay, KMD Consulting Land Planner. He states, the 2000 map of the prime agricultural land is still applicable today. John Turvey, OMAFRA, Agriculture Land Use Planning, Senior Advisor. I see no reason that the 2000 map of the prime farmland cannot be reinstated. Myself and our committee are proposing to work with council to effectively protect our prime agricultural land for future generations. Thank you for your support. Now I want to just pass to Andrew here. Andrew will be, I'll bring up.
Okay, Andrew, you're next on the list. So good
Thank you.
timing, Ed. That was perfect.
Thank you, Reeve Wise and council. Thank you for having us. One of the things that, we're all agreed upon is that we're going to be heading into a housing crisis. As you probably know, the Bank of Canada has predicted that by 2026, housing prices will surpass COVID levels. So the demand is going to be incredibly high. We all know that and I say this as an immigrant myself, all are descendants of immigrants, but we have 1.5 million immigrants coming in over the next, between now and 2026. We have 780,000 housing starts. It means that clearly we're going to have trouble meeting housing demand. And I know that's going to be complicating things here in Stone Mills because we will be having people obviously wanting to build, and I totally understand that. We want to encourage that. And now we've entered this public discussion about farmland. Of course, the issue then becomes, are we raising the anxieties of developers who now suddenly will feel they got to rush in and get land before any kind of regulations come in? So we're very keen to work with council and to come up with some plan that's going to cover us for the next 2 to 5 years. Doing nothing, I'm afraid, is really going to not be an option in terms of protecting any kind of farmland here. In terms of our draft proposal, if we look, going straight to the Stone Mills prime agricultural land sector, in establishing permanent agriculture areas in Stone Mills Township, sufficient agricultural prime farmlands must be protected to allow flexibility in crop and animal production. It must allow the farm industry to evolve. It must be adequate to generate returns that can support a comprehensive local agricultural community, which includes support services. So some guiding principles when we're looking at here. Protection of prime PA areas by preventing further fragmentation and loss of the agricultural land base caused by lot creation and the redesignation of prime ag areas. So the big issue here, I think if you look at the PPS, we're talking about not developing on prime farmland, period. Here in Stone Mills, we have plenty of land that is not prime. And that really needs to be encouraged for use. Fragmentation is a huge issue. And I think every time you drive by the Hudgens Farm in Strathcona, it's an awful example of fragmentation. And so this prevents, again, in here, I'm not, as you imagine, a big proponent of big agriculture. But we have a whole food system in Canada based on it. And so we have to face that reality as we're having to produce food in a very large scale level for a good chunk of our food supply. Okay, we need provision of appropriate flexibility to allow for agricultural-related and on-farm diversified uses, normal farm practices in an evolving agriculture and rural economy, increased certainty. And again, and I totally understand my neighbor's a developer, anybody in business needs certainty. And this is where I think government really needs to step up. We need opportunities to support a diversified rural economy by protecting prime farmland and other farm resource-related areas. And directing non-related development to areas where it will minimize constraints on these farm uses. We have a provincial policy statement, which I'm sure you're quite well aware of. if we, again, we're going down now to the issue of the prime areas. I think probably the key area here is, let's get the County Atlantic National Lear study. This bylaw will be in effect until such time as the County of Lennox and Addington conducts a full Lear study of all agricultural lands. So we understand it's temporary, but it's necessary. Our concern is, what if the county decides it doesn't want to conduct a Lear study? Or the one that's required? And at that point, we're asking Stone Mills then, at that point, needs to consider having its own Lear study. If the provisions of the County of Lennox and Addington Lear study is not met, the township will consider its own study. And then we have the zoning bylaw 2014-744 to be amended to conform to the provisions of this prime farm protection. Now we come to some specific ideas. Now, I really want to emphasize, this is a first draft. It is being circulated to various experts, such as in MAFRA and other planners, to see, is this, any of this really, can it be used? All right, Schedule 1, the bylaw. Okay, so this Schedule 1 map, why do we keep going back to it? It's in a very interesting integration. First of all, it was approved in a bylaw. And I think we all believe that it serves as an excellent starting point for the township to build on. It's not static. It's something that can be amended and should be as we gain more knowledge about the lands. It does integrate the whole farmland issues with lot lines, which obviously are important for municipal planning. And it's really interesting. It's a real attempt to present farms and prime agricultural areas as an integrated whole. And if you look at the Moscow area even, or any farms, you're going to look at a collection of things that make it a farm. And I find it fascinating that back in 2000, that was a concern. Today, I would say it's interesting, it's taken on a new twist. I finally found out why the Farmland Trust was interested in our farm. We have 150 acres of managed forest and 50 acres of arable land. 5 years ago, they were not interested. The guy said, even if you gave us the property, we'd sell it and buy some good land in southwestern Ontario. What's changed? What's changed is the federal government and various agencies are now very concerned with the integration between woodland and farmland and wetland. All those things are considered part of the ecosystem. Hence, when you look at these kinds of maps, yeah, it looks a bit odd, but that was the attempt there. It's integrating municipal lot lines, it's integrating farms as a whole. Secondly, so any severance on lands identified as prime agricultural area or class 1 soils. So that will go, obviously refer to the Arcadis map. The applicant shall submit a prime ag impact assessment performed by a member in good standing of the Ontario Institute of Agrologists to confirm that 100% of the proposed severance is not situated on prime agricultural soils. Again, the maps, they're okay, they're fairly accurate. It's interesting though, none of them show my field of 20 acres of class 1 soil, but the ag map, Ag Ontario map does. Those act as guides. So that's where you have to, obviously we need boots on the ground to say, okay, is this prime ag land or not? The council shall appoint an agricultural soil committee composed of one nominee from each of the following locally recognized farm groups. Each member chosen by the farm group: the Ontario Federation of Agriculture, Christian Farmers Federation of Ontario, and the National Farmers Union, who are not members of council or any of its governing bodies, to make recommendations to council for advice and recommendations on severances and the protection of prime agricultural farmland in the township of Stone Mills. So again, this will begin offering advice at some level to say, okay, is there, clearly we can come across patches of class 1 land that's not on the maps. How do we treat those? Okay. Agricultural land use designation. So the creation of any lot for agricultural purposes must be of a size appropriate for the type of agricultural areas uses common in the area and sufficiently large to maintain flexibility for future changes in the type or size of agricultural operations. Farm holdings to be generally not less than the minimum lot size of 40 hectares. And as a general rule, the splitting up of original farm units into smaller farm parcels will be strongly discouraged. 5, farm parcels smaller than 40 hectares can be considered for severances in special circumstances. For example, niche farming operations. And if the consent is considered appropriate by the Agricultural Soil Committee and the Council of Stone Mills Township, go to it. A second farm-related residence for the accommodation of an essential farm employee or retiring farmer may be permitted on a farm holding of 40 hectares or more, providing all servicing and access requirements, the official plan and zoning bylaw can be met. The residence must be kept part of the farm property. And this is where I see there's a lot more flexibility that we need to have in these things. 7, a second farm-related residence, severance on prime ag land for residential uses shall not exceed the area of 0.4 hectares, except to the extent of any additional area deemed necessary to support a well and private sewage. And number 8, non-farm residential use development will not be allowed on prime ag land and is encouraged to locate in hamlets or other areas designated for such use by the Township of Stone Mills. And that's where really we want to encourage the township to develop a plan to show where these places are, where this can be done. And number 9, it is the intention of the prime farmland protection bylaw to maintain agricultural lands in economical viable units by preventing fragmentation of farms and prime agricultural farmland in the Township of Stone Mills. And 10, commercial and industrial uses will not be allowed on prime ag land. They're encouraged to locate in areas designated commercial or industrial so as to retain the integrity of prime ag areas and promote the character of the rural landscape. And obviously, in number 11, just to make sure everybody understands, in prime ag areas, all types, sizes, and intensities of agricultural uses and normal farm practices shall be promoted and protected in accordance with Ontario provincial standards. Thank you.
Thanks, Andrew. And the next speaker will be Jacob Ellens.
Thank you, Bree Wise. I don't have a formal presentation. I think I want to, following a few of the speakers who we call ourselves a group of 7, I guess, because there are just 7 of us, not because we're artistic. But in any case, I want to make just a couple of comments to fill in a little bit of background to what you've been hearing. Maybe I can just say, first of all, my own experience. It happens that I'm the one who's kind of to blame or whatever for first having begun to goad council about what's happening to actually building houses on prime farmland. And that started in the late winter and early spring of 2023. I regularly walk on the Cataraqui Trail. I'm a farmer's son, and I know that was, the year before, I've been a cornfield, and I saw that there were water wells being drilled on it. And it doesn't take a lot of agricultural know-how to know that most farmers don't put water wells in a cornfield. So I contacted Reeve Wise, asking what the plans were, what our policy was. And one of the things I began to do is I began to read after, learning from him that he knew nothing about any plans to develop that land. I began reading in the provincial plan, or the official plan. And so I came at it fresh, and reading it, one of the things I read was that we in the township are committed to protecting class 1, 2, and 3 land, and language that I'm sure is familiar to all of you. And then I began to realize that it was exactly the same wording as in the county. And then I came to realize, that's a provincial policy statement. Word for word, it's a provincial policy statement. So that's what's held from the province to the county to the township. There's one problem, and that is I realized, wait a minute, but that's what we're committed to, but we're not committed to it. because according to the PPS, you don't build houses on class 1, 2, and 3 land. And yes, that's exactly what we're looking at doing. So the other thing, I also gave a presentation to the Committee of Adjustment in the winter of 2023, really pleading for the Galbraith land, or it's a 50-acre field, for those of you who don't know it. 50-acre field, it's really class 2 land. Furthermore, it sits on a rapid recharge area, and underneath is a giant aquifer. And I realized there as well that there were special protections for water, and realizing that the aquifer is actually the very, very important basis for reliable water for villages around, and for farmers who use that water. And so I think and then I should say that the thing that was shocking was that in giving a presentation and calling on the committee to pay attention to the need to protect that land, then Mr. Clancy, as chair of that committee, before we even had a chance to speak, and this is the same thing that was said by Mr. Goodyear, he startled us when he said there's no future for agriculture in this township. And he went on to say the only future for us is to build houses. That sort of rattled my mind, because how do you fit that with what the PPS says, what the townships, what we say in our official plan, what the county says, and what the province says? Now, let me move ahead. Looking now at the amendments that were suggested in May by you as council, I recognize that I know I was very critical, still am, but I do want to say, first of all, that I appreciate the fact that council was paying attention to the fact that there was a growing movement of buying up farmland. And so the attempt with some of the amendments is certainly, at least as you said then, to slow down that process of farmland, good farmland, going for housing. I guess the problem still is that yeah, it's a lot better than not having any protection, but it still would be better to actually say, yes, we're going to be guided by what the PPS actually says about not building on class 1, 2, and 3 land. Another thing I think is that the thing to consider, and here for me, growing up on a farm, one of the things I was struck by, I ended up talking to quite a number of farmers, and what I began to find is that there were numbers of farmers who told me that they had wanted to buy other farmland, and they came to the conclusion that they were being priced out of the market. In fact, the Galbraith field is one example. I know that they're a 50-acre field. A farmer bid $10,000 an acre, $500,000, was turned down because of the fact that a developer was willing to pay nearly $1 million. It's very hard to compete with that. I've talked to other farmers who have actually said they put offers on land and were told, well, I'm not ready yet to deal with you, fellow farmer, because I think I can do better, with that. And indeed they can, because the developer can give you a lot more money than farmers can pay for. I think the last thing I want to say is, again, a background question, is that one of the things that I've sort of watched happening as we've been studying this for the last year plus, is that our township has a manager of development services, does a great job, he knows what he's doing. However, there's an interesting thing, and that is that I think there's a structural problem in our township, and that is that, for example, we know from a letter that at some point that the Galbraiths wrote a letter that they had been approached by Mr. Sands, by another township official, asking, would you be interested in turning your 50 acres into a subdivision? Now, the thing is, I'm not blaming Mr. Sands. I mean, he's manager of development services. You're looking to him to actually try to develop land. And as Mr. Clancy believes, that the way to make it financially is to build houses and to get more tax revenue. But I think that there's a problem. There's a structural problem, and that is this: that when Mr. Sands goes and talks to a farmer or landowner, he's there representing the development side of what it is that you as a council are trying to do. But the responsibility of the council is always a lot more than trying to expand your tax base. When you go to talk to a landowner, you go there as a council member with responsibility really for being the guardian of our soil, of our water, of the community of farmers or working farmers, all of that, but also then paying attention to water conditions. And everybody knows that people in this township are dead scared about what's going to happen to my water. You hear that constantly when they talk about severing land. Now, what I want to suggest is that when you as council members are dealing with landowners, you can never talk to them just with your development cap on. You always have to be there as a council member representing the full orb of what it is that you're doing. And that we as residents of this township depend on you to protect our whole way of life, to protect farming, to protect water, and all of that. But you cannot just have a single person there going as looking for development. And that's why I like some of the things that a few of my colleagues are saying about what should happen when you're actually dealing with land development, that you always have to be looking at the fuller question, not just at how much revenue this township can make. So that's why I really want to encourage you to take seriously some of the concrete recommendations that are being brought forward. And this is, of course, something that Reeve Wise challenged us on a number of weeks ago. That's what we're trying to follow through on and actually come up with concrete advice of how to move forward. Thanks very much.
Thanks, Jacob. And the next speaker is Stephanie Berhotsky.
Thank you, Reeve Wise. I wanted to talk a little bit about the mapping and Lear studies tonight, because I'm not sure that we all know what Lear studies are about. And I think that we're looking in terms of this, this RAG amendment that you're proposing. It's based on the fact that it is an interim thing, and then eventually we will be having a Lear study done, which is going to make everything settled and contribute to our official plan. Well, I'm a little dubious about that. First of all, I feel like I've been beating my head against a brick wall for a long time about this stuff. The township has about 23,000 acres of class 1 to 3 soils, okay? And I get to use this, okay? That's all of that brown and that yellow and that beige on that map over there, okay? I don't know if the council can see it, but you've seen it plenty of times, I'm sure. But they've only designated that little tiny square in there. That's 500 acres as prime agricultural. And, you know, I think it's like, I think of it kind of like for them, it's the council's land use porn or something, because they know it's wrong, they know it's illegal, but they're addicted to the image, and they can't or they won't accept that there's more to farming in Stone Mills than just Moscow. So that's my concern. The ironic thing is that, you know, you do recognize that there are other areas of class 1 to 3 soils in the township. We know that they've made up a whole new designation for it, rural agricultural, or RAG. And that's what they're trying to promote tonight. The new proposal still allows severances on prime farmland, but it attempts through vague wording to place arbitrary limits on how it's done. And who's going to decide matters when a consent application falls into one of those poorly defined gray areas? Staff and the Committee of Adjustment, and we know where their sympathies lie. The proposal is just as contrary to the PPS as the current situation of zoning. Now, council claims this is an interim measure to protect farmland until a Lear study is done by the county. Now, I'm going to ask you, Reeve Wise, as warden of the county, can you tell me just how enthusiastic county council is to take on this rather extensive project at considerable expense? You don't have to answer now. You can think about that one. And I might be exaggerating. It can't be that expensive because Mr. Clancy and his soil survey committee managed to rezone the whole township with a one-day road trip 18 years ago. So there's absolutely no need to wait for a Lear study to protect those class 1 to 3 lands. You know they're there. You know they're to be protected. The PPS says they should be protected. Or go back to the land map from 2000 that was introduced by my colleagues earlier. That data is current and could be recognized as of now until a Lear study is initiated. So what is a Lear study anyway, and what's the importance of it? Well, a land evaluation and area review. Okay, that's what Lear stands for. And there's another one, Agricultural Land Evaluation System, or AILS, are two recognized methodologies for informing the designation of prime agricultural areas. And either of these two approaches may be conducted to help identify prime agricultural areas or the agricultural land base more broadly for designation in official plans. There are two parts to a Lear study. The first one, the land evaluation part, which is the LE, which assesses inherent soil and climatic conditions for agriculture. OMAFRA's CLI mapping is used to identify and compare the agricultural capability for common field crops. Well, you're already there. You already know that. You don't have to do the first part of the study. You have it already. OMAFRA's Prime Agricultural Area webpage explains that prime agricultural areas are not only areas where Canada Land Inventory classes 1 to 3 predominate, but often include associated CLI classes 4 to 7 lands. The CLI agricultural capability mapping from Ontario GeoHub should be used as it provides the most current information. And I have that map over there. I only have the bottom third of the township, but I have that, and it's very detailed. It's even more detailed than that one, but I know that that's the same information that Nancy got, I think, a while ago. No, it's okay, because it only shows part of the township, so, okay. Thanks, Wayne. So we have to remember that agriculture is much more than just the field crops on those 1 to 3 soils. So the second part of the study is the area review, that's the AR, which considers other factors. And this is the part that you would have to have done. Important to agricultural potential, such as fragmentation of the land base that Edward mentioned before, and how land is used. Prime agricultural areas include areas where there is a local concentration of farms which exhibit characteristics of ongoing agriculture. When assessing this portion of the definition, a variety of factors should be considered. What is the actual land use? Is the land being used, or does it have potential for agricultural purposes? Have investments been made into crops, e.g. perennial plant stock such as trees or grapevines, or agricultural infrastructure or organic farming, livestock facilities, other agricultural buildings, drainage systems, fencing, and so on? Those are all considered in the second part of the review. What are the lot sizes within the study area? Is there a high degree of lot fragmentation? That's what a Lear study will do. Together, all these factors are considered in order to arrive at a score which helps determine the designation of a prime agricultural area. But it starts with the CLI designation, which you already have, and which we have in place here, thanks to Nancy from Arcadis. And so the council knows the area that must be protected now. Any Lear or AILS study will just go beyond that to identify agricultural areas encompassing those prime ag soils. And I'll end there. Thank you.
Thank you, Stephanie. And next, from LNA Federation of Agriculture, we have Max Kaiser.
Thank you. Most of you recognize me, but for those who don't, my name is Max Kaiser. I'm a farmer, not actually in Stone Mills, but I'm representing the board because of one of your members couldn't be here tonight because of a grade 8 grad that he had to take part in. And that's why I'm dressed as I am, because I was a chauffeur for my niece tonight. I'm also a farmer's son, and I'm also a farmer's father. And LAFA, Land Exciting Federation of Agriculture, we just call it LAFA. We have about 350 members across the county. So I'm going to approximate about a quarter of those are here in Stone Mills. We'd like to thank Stone Mills council and staff for making sure this happened here tonight. We like to be good neighbors and keep a good relationship with municipalities, and this is a great opportunity for us to contribute, but also make ourselves available to you. It's interesting to note that the county federation, the provincial federation, and your council are kind of all on the same page about farmland preservation. And And I've heard some comments as the evening's gone on. I wrote a script, which I'm not going to stick to in the least, but I've given a copy to your planner so you have it on record. But agriculture is large, small, specialty, and everything in between. We recognize the validity of every type of agriculture. And man, I look at that map right there and I think I have 1,400 acres and I don't have any Class 1 land. And I'm a long way south of here. And if I had even half of that, I think I'd have won the lottery. You guys have a really difficult challenge in front of you. But I think in the end, if nobody's happy, you're probably as close to right as you can be. So like taxes, right? So I would say, I wrote this down, every acre matters. In the last 35 years, Ontario has lost 2.8 million acres of farmland to urban development. Whether it's a town growing to a city or a hamlet growing to a town or a city sprawling out, that's equivalent of 175 acres per day for urban development. And I think the biggest viewpoint from us as a farm organization is we're not opposed to development. Of course, we see the rise in population. We see our own families grow and we want second dwellings on the farm or a new house down the road for the next generation. But it's about targeting it and balancing it. Soil is a finite resource. The proposal that's been discussed, I think, is not really about prohibiting or restricting development, but it's more about providing a framework to target it. I'm going to skip ahead a little bit. Looking at your official plan, I note that you have already spent a great deal of effort in creating and passing an official plan, and it was only a couple of years ago, and most of the tools you have are in there. And I'm going to just read through. I pulled a few excerpts out of your official plan, which I thought were very appropriate to the discussion tonight, and actually are very interesting, actually, as you read them. Each community is unique. Stone Mills is no different in this regard. It offers the pastoral charm of large rural landscape dotted by small riverfront hamlets and scenic vistas. Resources such as prime ag lands, woodlands, sensitive groundwater aquifers will be protected. This is in your plan, will be protected from incompatible development. That's an important word, incompatible. Rural development in the rural area residential development in the rural area shall be limited to low density residential that is compatible with surrounding development. Remote or scattered development will be discouraged. The vacant land supply within the boundaries of hamlets shown on the Land Use Plan Schedule A in the 2022 official plan exceeds the projected growth requirements until 2036. In the review of planning applications, consideration will be given to the protection of renewable and non-renewable resources. That was one I really twigged on because I see soil and farmland as a non-renewable resource. As the cities and towns sprawl outwards, again, coming back to that map, most of the Class 1 land is under Toronto now. It's lost forever. And there's a reason the cities grew there, because that was where the people were. As we cover up more and more of that land, we're going to need the other lands to provide food, and trees will be cleared once again and what have you. I think as a council, you really need to challenge yourselves to think long-term, not the length of this term, not getting elected into the next term. You got to think generationally, even longer. Houses and buildings last for decades, if not longer. And if you're not thinking that way as you're presenting planning and developing plans, then you're not covering the planning period. So I'm just going to be really quick and short. And in closing, a thought to consider. Someday, in the distant future, whenever that might be, as the GTA stretches out from Guelph to Port Hope and from Lake Ontario to Georgian Bay, we might need Stone Mills to feed more than Stone Mills. So my challenge to you is to think about your vision of Stone Mills in that distant future. Is it covered with homes and a spattering of rural subdivisions, or does it remain 11 hamlets separated by green spaces and farms? And that's all I have for you tonight.
Thanks, Max. You win the Best Dressed Presenter Award, Max.
I thought I should just be close to your presence there, wise, streetwise.
And Gail, you're the last listed presenter, Gail Knowles.
Oh, yeah, lovely. Thank you. I hope that's close enough. Can you hear me?
Yes, is that
Okay.
fine for the audience? Can you hear Gail?
Good evening. I'm Gail Knowles. I'd like to make a few positive suggestions about how to move forward with rezoning and protecting agricultural land to PA. So as you can see from the map on the easel, there are many areas within the township that have class 1, 2, and 3 soils, perfect for agricultural use. Despite the apparent abundance of prime agricultural land shown on this map, there's only one area in all of the township zoned as PA or agricultural land. It's shown in the hash marks there. This is the area north of the Moscow Road and west of County Road 6. So I enlarged that area. It's in green. So there's Moscow, and this is the prime agricultural land. This is the prime agricultural land. So as you can see from the light blue area on this map here, there's Moscow, and this is the Moscow zone, Moscow block. That the area of, this is class 1 farmland, is almost the same size as the block, but it's zoned rural. There it is. This is the, there's Moscow, and this is the block, and there's the class 1 farmland. The third map, this is my last map, clearly demonstrates that the class 1 soil extends well beyond the boundaries of the Moscow block, which is shown in green here. There's Moscow, and there's the area there. If you look at earlier maps showing soil classifications, you will see that the Moscow block is not the only area with first-class soils in the township. These maps, which is this one right here, show there are sizable areas of very high-quality soils in the Camden East and Newburgh areas. So Wayne, if you could point. So there's a Newburgh, and there's a Camden East. All of this land, apart from the Moscow block, is zoned rural, and quite a bit of it has already been subdivided into housing lots. Thank you, Wayne. The Stone Mills official plan, as you already know, dated October 22, and the Provincial Policy Statement 2020 both protect prime agricultural land. In the official plan, the township states in section 1.5.2 strategy, quote, resource areas such as prime agricultural lands, woodlands, sensitive groundwater aquifers, and aggregate deposits will be protected from incompatible development, unquote. And from section 2.3 agriculture found in the provincial policy statement, 2.3.1, quote, prime agricultural areas shall be protected for long-term use for agriculture, unquote. If protecting agricultural land is indeed the policy of both the province and the township, zone agricultural land as PA, so landowners and the township know how to proceed and the land is protected from incompatible development. Zoning all the lands outside the hamlets as rural must be changed so that class 1, 2, and 3 prime agricultural land is properly zoned as PA. Merely designating this category of land does not protect it from being used for something other than agriculture. designation is not enough. Prime agricultural land must be protected and zoned PA. If the township is not prepared to zone prime agricultural land as PA, citizens need to know why not. I understand the need for housing, and as you can see from the map, there's plenty of areas within the township that are white that could have houses built on them. So it's not like as if we are short of land, but using prime agricultural land for that purpose, that is housing, is a waste of a valuable finite resource. Once the guidelines governing permitted activities and the size of consents were loosened, when PA zones were changed to RU, there is even less prime agricultural land than there once was. This land is too valuable to use for anything other than agriculture. Once the activities permitted on agricultural land change, it is very difficult or impossible to return the property to agricultural uses. Since severances have already been approved or have pending applications on land that should be zoned PA, the township and the public don't have an accurate picture of the amount of agricultural land that is still available for farming. Oh, here's a few suggestions of how to accomplish this rezoning. The township is proposing a new zone called rural agricultural. Why not revert to the original PA or agricultural zone and use the previous rules and guidelines for size, setbacks, minimum distance separations, permitted uses, etc. as a starting point? This would save time and manpower, and landowners are familiar with the guidelines formerly in place. In order to bring everything up to date, use existing sources for soil classifications like this. Use what is already on hand to save time and effort. To help with this rezoning, I suggest cross-referencing the land previously identified as having class 1, 2, and 3 soils with the property tax records in the area to decide which properties are now taken for housing or other uses and which can be zoned PA. There needs to be a temporary suspension of all approvals for severances, especially in prime agricultural lands, until the township has an accurate map of the agricultural land that remains, the bylaw is passed, and all rezoning has been accomplished. Since the Township of Stone Mills official plan guarantees the protection of prime agricultural land, why doesn't the township zone these lands PA? Thank you very much.
Thanks, Gail. So Gail was the last listed presenter, and I think someone indicated at the start that they might like, yes, sir, yeah, come up to the mic and identify yourself, and
Yes.
The floor is yours.
All right, thank you. I apologize because I'm just coming to this over the last week and maybe a little bit. So my name is Quincy Emmons. I am a veteran firefighter here in Stone Mills of over 27 years. So I predate Stone Mills. So I'm one of the older guys, whether you believe it or not. I'm also a successful entrepreneur, and I just kind of wanted to bring up a couple incidents. As an entrepreneur, I believe that we might be rushing into something here when we have time. Let's wait. Let's see the Lear study. When you have time, take advantage of the time. My concerns as a taxpayer in the municipality is we're limiting our tax growth, which will impact all tax payers here. Higher taxes while growing costs, especially in today's economy, means we're going to struggle just to maintain our current services. And I also want to, I also noticed throughout this, the different presentations that we're talking about land in certain areas that's already maybe defined or will be defined under this bylaw, but we're already talking about expanding that. And I think expanding that will impact everybody, obviously, but it also impacts the employees of the township. And we're adding red tape to both the home builders, the taxpayers, and the the staff here at Stone Mills. I built a house in 2005. And it was a struggle for red tape, especially with an in-law suite to help look after my parents. And every time I come into the building here and dealt with a lot of the employees, I think some are still here, but some have moved on. It was, what do you want? And it just kind of drug on me. I would actually make sure that I got receipts of handing paperwork in because there was a lot of red tape, especially around that in-law suite. And I think the red tape impacts negatively erodes the team here without really knowing that. I also sat on the Economic Development Coalition for a number of years, and I got to see comments about other townships in the county and how they were having problems. And I was very proud to say that Stone Mills, I could see the growth, I could see the change. And since we purchased our what we hope to be as our forever homestead near Enterprise, is that whole mentality has changed with this team. I don't know who's responsible for it, but I think they all should be commended, because now when I come in here, it's, hey, Quincy, how can we help you? And I'm worried that if we limit our tax base, we create more red tape, more frustration for not just the potential people trying to build and come in here. We're going to erode that team that is doing an exceptional job. I noticed too, there was comments about, there's a lot of land to build. Well, the reality is there's a lot of land, but there's already other restrictions on some of these lands. I know from my property, I'm already in a very fine window where I can build a house, although I own a lot of property. So there's other land restrictions that we need to consider. I think if we give ourselves a little bit more time, talk to AMO is coming up for an example. Like, let's talk to other municipalities, because they're all concerned about this. And I do believe that new development is already discussed in open forums here. Like, we already have that. I'm just worried we're putting ourselves into a corner that when we have time, we should just take advantage of that time. So just wanted to thank everybody for this opportunity. Thank you.
Thanks, Quincy. Anyone else wish to address council? Yes, come forward, please. Hi, just identify yourself and
Hi.
the floor is yours.
I'm Elaine Potter, and I live at 2897 County Road 6 in the village of Yarker. I've spent my entire life working with horses and have loved every minute of it. I spent my career as a competitive rider, as a trainer, and as a practitioner of therapy riding, and as a teacher of the art of dressage, and I judged it at the national level. I'm delighted that equestrian facilities were mentioned as an acceptable use in your prime agricultural areas. I must, however, caution you that equestrian installations, known in my world as stables, can make questionable neighbors if the township allows housing development to be built in close proximity to them. In terms of nutrient management, boarding and training facilities produce about 40 pounds of manure per horse per day, so they face the same challenges as a farm when homes on well and septic systems are located nearby. In addition, the smells may pose issues for some homeowners. I happen to really like the smell, but not necessarily inside my home. But homeowners can also cause problems for equestrian operators, as irregular or unexpected vehicle noise can startle horses. They don't think, they act, react, and riders who are training or exercising. A lifetime of horses. Equestrian installations are best located in true agricultural zones rather than a hybrid rural agricultural zone that permits a wide variety of uses. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Elaine. Anyone else wish to address council this evening? Yes, Eric. Just identify yourself in case there's anyone here who doesn't know who you are.
Good evening, Yeah, good evening, Council. I'm Pat Reeve, Eric Smith. On our mapping back in 2006, we had the provincial government come in, and Doug and you and I sat on council.
And sit on council until the following term.
Okay.
I wasn't on council in '06.
Okay, well,
just
anyway,
to be
but
clear.
the mapping
Yeah.
that we did when I was here, and we got Clarence Kennedy and Bob Clancy do the mapping. We asked for only Class 1 land to be mapped at that time. And at the time, you remember that, Doug? Yeah, but anyway, well, I remember because I was, and they wouldn't map any small areas, like we were talking about Bob Hanna's place at Reedville. And that's the smallest mapping that the provincial government would do at that time. It was, I think, about 500 or 750 acres at Moscow. And they weren't going to recognize any small pockets because it would be just like a pinpoint on the map. So that is actually how that come to be that one parcel at that time. So I just wanted to clarify that. Okay.
Thanks, Eric. Anyone else? Yes, sir. Just come forward and identify yourself.
Don Wemp. I farm some of that land in Moscow that they're talking about. And I would have anybody out to help pick some rock. There was a reason we talk a lot about prime agricultural land here and the stipulations on prime agricultural land. And 20 some years ago, there was people, they got the land changed for a reason. The prime agricultural, like I farm probably 1,000 acres in Moscow. And I have a family of 4, and I would not want to have to make a living doing that. I wear multiple hats. I also own a company. I am a contractor. I build homes. So what I'm trying to say is the criteria you have in place right now still protects the farmer. It only allows 3 lots off of a piece of land and a remainder. So on a 100-acre farm, you're losing 3 hectares. What I would say is the minimum size of a building lot should be decreased from a hectare to, an acre and a half, like a half a hectare. Nobody wants to maintain a hectare of land. And that's where I see land consumption being wasted. And I just wanted to place my opinion. Thank you.
Thanks, Donnie. Anyone else? Yes, come ahead. Just identify yourself and the floor is yours.
Ian Ryans from Enterprise. I've been a volunteer firefighter for 23 years. We bought our house when I was 21. It was a farm, 140 acres. Went on to have children, two kids. I was always under the assumption that I could sever 2 lots to keep those children on the farm. All I have to say is the map is quite vague. A lot of that swamp around our house. And I was just wondering if there's going to be better maps put out with lots, part lots, concessions, that kind of thing. Just a question.
That's what the Lear study would determine more accurately.
Mm-hmm.
This is just a starting point, and nothing's been decided at all yet. So that's why we're seeking input, and questions like yours will be part of what we're looking to understand.
And part of my land is on that, but it is not prime agriculture.
I know the land I farm is, some of it's prime and some of it isn't, but it's all designated too. And that's what the Lear study would would zero in on. So,
All right.
yeah, thank you.
Thanks.
Anyone else? Yes, please come forward and identify yourself, and the floor is yours.
I'm Lynn Fenwick. When they're talking about peace in Moscow, I'm not sure if you're referring to my father's land, James Fenwick. But when we built our house in 1990, we were considered on prime. We had to prove to the township that the piece of land that we have, the little parcel we have on the corner of Keach and Moscow Road, was unfit farm land to build. We dug our basement, it was all shale, it was all tested. What bothers me is there are people that come in here and take prime agricultural land and go haywire and build new homes on them. We need our farmland. We don't need all of these subdivisions around. When I go down Moscow Road, when I put the hydro in, I had to pay for hydro. And I've talked to Sherry about this. I was told that if somebody had built around me within 8 years, that hydro would give me a percentage of the money back because I had to pay for the line to be brought from Nick Whitty's over to the corner of my place. So in saying that, of course nobody was going to build. It was all my dad's. And then now I go down that road and it's heartbreaking. I'm sorry, Wemp and Smith, but you're taking a barn, tearing it down that is agricultural and turning it into residential. I don't think it's right, and I don't think it's fair. Farmland is farmland. I've been raised on a farm, and in fact, if my dad would have agreed to come, Rob, he said that he was going to be attacked. I could take it. So anyways, I said, no worries. I can handle it. I'm going to voice my opinion because you know what? It wasn't allowed back in 1990, 91 when I got married. The map should stay the same. Prime land is prime land. If you can produce or prove that it's unfit prime land, then by all means, go ahead. But if you can work it, you shouldn't be holding on it. Thank you.
Lynn, anyone else? Yes, just come forward.
The official art, I don't remember when Bernie Evans was here. With Mickey in his back pocket, up here scaring the hell out of all you people. And nobody remembers Bernie. Anyways.
Just identify yourself and the floor is yours.
Anyways, all my kids went to university.
You just give us your name first.
My name is Bart Spafford.
Thank
I
you.
live in Moscow. Anyways, all my kids went to university, but I've always told them, you better know how to grow a tomato. And it seems to me that everything comes down to money. And I don't really know how everything works with you guys and everything like that. But shouldn't we be, instead of trying to squeeze as much as we can out of this, the people here, is there something you can put together to ask the guys up the chain that we need some more cash? Like, we're short of doctors, so they're trying to do whatever they can for doctors. Well, like the guy said, we're short of farmers. We should be doing more for them too, some way, giving them something to get more of a thing. And maybe that's what we should be approaching, the other end of the stick here. Because here, everybody's gonna, well, this guy's got this, all that sort of stuff. But everybody up the chain, they got money up their ass, those guys, and they're spending on nothing, stupid shit. Give it to the farmers, for God's sakes. Do something for them. Put together a proposal, send it up to Trudeau over there and say, hey, man, let's do something for farmers. So then so Donnie can turn around and he said, like he said, you can't make a living farming. Everybody knows that. Nobody's going to make a living farming. So what else can they do? They sell property or they do this or do that.
Double McQuay had 2 jobs all his life, working at the plant and farming. And he worked hard. Get him up there, tell him, we need, without farm, where are we? We're screwed. And as for all the people coming into the country, 80% of them go to the cities anyways. Leave them the goddamn there. Let them build houses there. And all this stuff, $500,000 homes and stuff like that, that's not affordable living. I have a house in Elmont. There's a 1 acre lot in front of us. A developer bought it for 340 grand. He put 13 houses on that property. 13. You should see it. It's like living in a silo. They're just, seniors wouldn't want them. People that have kids wouldn't want them. I don't know who's wanting them. They're right in my next backyard. It's got to be people that are insane. That's all I can think of. And they want $4,200 a month to live there. $4,200 a month. So they are going to be insane people. That's going to be my neighbors. Get some money to the farmers. Write up a proposal. Send it up to them. We'd love to see that. Maybe it doesn't go anywhere. I don't know how it all works. But I mean, everybody here would sign it. They'd all say, yeah, give some money to the farmers. Then you're going to say you can save a lot of the agriculture because those guys will use it. There's no sense in having agriculture that's got 10,000 weeds growing through it and it's not worth anything to anybody. Nobody's growing anything on it. Give it to the guys who want to farm it. Give it to Donnie's kids. He's got 2 boys there. Geez, they'll farm anything. Anyways, tell the guys upstairs to fucking give some money.
Thank you, Bart. Anyone else? No one else wish to address the issue at this point. Then I would open it up to council for any comments and questions, and staff as well at this point. Anyone from council or staff wish to address any point that's been raised tonight or add something else to the discussion? Jason Sands, our development fellow. I almost said acting CAO. Thanks, Jason. Go ahead.
Thank you, Reeve Weiss. As many of you know, my name is Jason Sands. I'm the manager of development services with the township, and I'm not here to provide a specific comment related to any of that in which was heard this evening. I'm here to provide an update for members of council and/or members of the community who may be interested in this topic. Following my conversation and meeting with the Ontario Federation of Agriculture's Director of Policy, Jason Bent, who works out of their Guelph office. I had a productive meeting with their office related to the conundrum that we find ourselves in here in Stone Mills Township. The update is that essentially they support our quest in completing a LEAR study and having that done at the county level, as there is benefit in having such a study done outside of municipal jurisdiction, as we know. Many of us have heard that conversation and are familiar with it. And I'm aware that Reeve and Deputy Reeve may be able to provide an update for us in which the county made that consideration on June 19th. Second to that, we discussed our interim measure. I explained to Mr. Bent that the township with the support of Arcadis has proposed an interim policy measure at the OP level and at the zoning level to potentially provide some direction in protecting our lands while that study is underway, given the time frame associated. In short, there was general resounding support to that quest and to that venture at the municipal level. And I had educated them on the fact that it was completely premised on the CLI mapping that we've talked about at length this evening. One of the other suggestion, I should say, that came from Mr. Bent and his colleagues at OFA was, as opposed to using the OFA or the CLI class 1 through 3 mapping, was to use MPAC's methodology for tax credit. So if a land holding within your corporation for the past 3 years, for example, had been receiving the tax rate program for agricultural use, then it could be utilized as being one that you should put through your level of protections, if you will, in introducing a RAG, a rural agricultural zone on it, and or a policy set, so that you could have a further level of protection on land division, as we've talked about, as well as location of development on that land holding from an as of right building permission. So I just wanted to offer that for council's consideration this evening, as well as any of those in the public who have interest, because it's not one that I heard tonight from anybody. And I also haven't, this was a meeting that has happened fairly recently. I've not compiled a map cross-referencing what that looks like with a CLI 1 through 3 soils test to understand what the acreage would be. However, I thought it was a very interesting suggestion, and I previously shared this with Reeve Wise, and he thought it would be, collectively, we thought it'd be advised that everybody be informed of such consideration. So thank you, Reeve.
Thanks, Jason. Yes, Wayne.
Can we ask Jason a question?
Sure.
Jason, what are your thoughts on trying to cross-reference with either approved applications or with lands that have already been taken out, so they're shown on a map? Because I think a couple of things you said there are very promising.
One moment. Thank you. Just for the sake of those that are very likely watching on here, they probably can't hear me. I don't know how.
No, thanks, Rob. I should have said that. Yeah. Wherever you are in the room, you have to be speaking through a mic because it's broadcast worldwide.
Yeah. So, Jason, yeah, just back again, a couple of very promising things in what you said. How difficult would it be to update the Arcadis map to show what's already gone? Because that is somewhat misleading, and I'm sure it's concerning to farmers who are on that map. Because they've already been approved, or they've actually been approved 2 years ago or 3 years ago. You see what I'm saying? Funny thing is, we're almost overlaying the two maps, the 2000 map, which was largely a zoning and taxation type property line map, with soils map, so that people can see how much is gone. Because some of it is gone, there's no point in arguing about it. The Galbraith land, for example, there's no point in arguing about it. That land has, if it can meet requirements, is going to be developed, and that's fair ball. He played the game fairly. Okay, for the question.
Through you, Reeve Wise. Thank you, Wayne, for the question. I understand the question. I just don't understand how we could depict that and illustrate it effectively on a map. And I say that because if we have, use an example, 500 acre land holding that's class 1, 2, or 3, and we've cut at some point in time a 2-3 acre lot out of it, does that mean it's gone? And if that's the case, are you excluding the 498 acres that's left? Or do you just mean flag it so that if there's a land holding that were in the 1, 2, 3 soils on CLI mapping, and there was a severance that had happened, then it's noted on that map? Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, no, I understand entirely. I don't know what the implications would be, but they certainly shouldn't be that it's gone, but the other patch of land is not gone. As you say it's 2 hectares that are gone and there's 140 hectares still there. No, but if it needs to be anticipated and shown that there are lands that are gone and there are pending applications which may well be approved. And that's another part. If they're pending, we cannot turn the clock back. They're going to be approved if they would fit on rural land, and that's fair ball. Okay, thanks.
Through you, Reeve Wise, I think we might be getting a little bit complicated as a desktop exercise. I think really what you're asking for is the essence of a LEAR study. As your colleague pointed out, we've got that land, the agricultural fragmentation component of the study, and I think that's what you're really looking to premise this on, and that we're advising is completed at that county level to ground truth what exists from that CLI mapping.
And last comment then, and that would be getting the LEAR done by our township as soon as possible, or by the county as soon as, but because 2 to 5 years will just be 2 to 5 years more of valid applications on rural and approvals. and we'll have even less land, and some of then you'll have real fragmentation issues where they can't farm it now. There's 27 houses on that road and they can't farm in behind it. Thanks.
I think Jacob had his hand up first. Go ahead, Jacob.
I'd like to have a practical question to Mr. Sands. Hypothetical question, but thinking about the amendments that you put forward and that we're talking about tonight, if we look at it's come up a few times, if we look at the Galbraith field or the Robinson Road field, 50 acres, County Road 4 and Cataract Trail. The question I have is all things being equal, I know it's hard to answer hypothetical questions, but what I'd like to know is that using those amendments, if in a year after these amendments are in place, if someone comes and says, I'd like to sever land there and build houses on that 50 acres, this where we are right now, the Committee of Adjustment has said yes to that, subject to hydrogeological survey and so on. So my question is, that 50 acres, class 2 soil, sitting on an aquifer on a rapid recharge area, would that land be found eligible to be developed or not?
Through you, Mr. Chair, if I understand the question is, would the Galbraith lands on the corner of Robinson County Road 4 be able to be subdivided the way in which they were subdivided last year and via the Committee of Adjustment, if the proposed official plan amendment and zoning bylaw amendment that we're seeking comment tonight was in effect? Is that a question? Short answer, no, it could not.
Given that the idea of these amendments is to reduce the amount of land that's developed, the amount of class 1, 2, and 3 land that's being developed. Given that permission was given by the Committee of Adjustment to develop that 50 acres, I would expect that it would be a lot harder for that to be developed after this new plan would be adopted. Is that not so?
Yeah, that's what he
Okay,
said.
as you're saying-
If I may, Jacob.
Okay.
Under the proposal, only 3 lots would be developable on each individual property, and their maximum size would be 1 hectare. And they would be directed to the less productive part of that property, and they would be directed along the road, permitted, but nothing like the estate lots that have been approved in its rural zoning, which was legitimate, if not desirable. So no, the development that has been approved there would not be permitted under this proposed policy.
Yeah, thank you. So that, I mean, I would see that obviously as an improvement. It's still, it means that the concern about not saying 1, 2, and 3 just should not be built on is preferable because of the fact that there are many, many, many fields that are 50 acres that if you allow 3 houses to be built on them, that in the not on a very long term, will have a negative effect. But nevertheless, it's better than where we are now.
That's kind of where we're at. And this is all subject to comment and modification, and it's going to be a long process. We could limit them to 1 acre, as I think it was it Don, you suggested that we reduce the lot size? And I see you, Steph, just let me interject something here. The reason we have a 1 hectare minimum lot size for any severance in the township is based on the subdivision proposal, and Gail, you will remember this, and Wayne, and perhaps others, at what's called Warner Pasture back then, near Yarker, where a development was proposed with very small lots on a very sensitive groundwater area. And council learned a lot at that time about hydrogeology and wells and cross-contamination. And out of that, we proposed in the official plan that was subsequent to that process, that to make things a little safer, to allow much more land for attenuation of septic beds, that we go to a larger minimum lot size. That's where the hectare proposal came in. And if I'm not mistaken, if a landowner that's proposing a severance wants to make it smaller, you still can by doing a hydro-G study to say there's enough soil here to support a septic bed on a smaller lot. So that's why we have the 1 hectare minimum lot size, and you can blame me because I proposed it at that time. But it is subject to studies and to modification. So that's a possibility. Steph, you had something.
I just want to ask for a little bit more clarification about Jason's question and the answer to it. And that is the lot, going back to the Galbraith property on Robinson Road. Now you're saying that under the new regulations, that particular subdividing or consents would not be allowed, but consents would still be allowed, right? They would just be smaller. So what does that leave?
Not just smaller, if I may interject, smaller and directed.
Okay, directed.
That's
But
critical.
what does that leave the remaining property, the retained parcel?
It
Is
leaves
it still farmable?
Through your
Go ahead,
revised-
Jason.
If I may, we continue to discuss this property that has been alluded to this evening multiple times as a 50-acre landholding. Firstly, it was 3 separately conveyable lots that did not constitute a single 50-acre landholding. So it's misleading to even talk about this sketch on the screen as to how this proposed official plan policy would limit development on that landholding if we're starting with the mindset that it's a single 50-acre landholding, because that's completely wrong. So secondly, this image on the screen would show how an existing lot of record could be subdivided by what Reeve Wise has mentioned, shifting and locating future severed 2.5 acre, 1 hectare severed parcels in a corner of a property to an attempt to secure the retained parcel as functional agricultural land. So it does not apply to the Galbraith lands because it's not that context, but that is what this proposed
So it
official
would
plan
still have
amendment
been
policy
approved then,
is
is what you're
to
saying.
happen.
Yeah, am I understanding that correctly? That since it doesn't apply to the Galbraith land, that the Galbraith thing would have been approved?
Through revise, it applies to the Galbraith land simply because that CLI map has it as a 1, 2, and 3 soil property, correct?
Mhm.
However, it doesn't apply in the context of it being a single 50-acre landholding. That's what I'm trying
Okay.
to reference.
Because I am just thinking of, in terms of the Hudgens land and one of those lots that was, those estate lots that was divided off there, they tried to continue farming around it, but they couldn't because the farmer got a little fed up with trying to move the equipment around, the driveway and the house and everything else that was there. So it wasn't farmable, even though that it was allowed to be farmed. So
Exactly, and that's what we're trying to avoid. If that house on one of those Hudgens lots had been down at the road in a corner, like the right-hand example, then it would still be farmable. And the new regulatory idea would be to not only limit the size of the lot, the Hudgens ones are far bigger, so the lot would be a hectare, and it would be appropriately located so the rest of the farmable land would be accessible and practically farmable.
So I'm still not entirely clear about how this would affect the Galbraith land, but anyway. I will,
Well, let's
think about
clarify
that.
it then. The Galbraith land was not one 50-acre property. It was 2 properties because there was an unopened road allowance. That's why the number of severances were allowed on 2 different properties. So on each of those properties, 3 severances were allowed. Correct me if I'm wrong,
Well, it's
Jason, at
actually
any
3
point.
properties there, 3 conveyable parcels.
Yeah, go ahead, Jason. Explain how many properties were there in the Galbraith land and what would be different under what we're proposing.
I'll share it with you. Go for it. You opened a can of worms, Jacob. Well, that's to Jacob. He's not good with maps.
Well, yeah. Yeah. So if you can find a mic somewhere, Jason, just to address what you've got up there.
All right. Okay, this is the property, 3 separate land holdings. This is the unopened road allowance Reeve Wise is referring to. Everything to the west was one land holding. And then there was a land holding in here from this line to this unopened road allowance. And then everything from this land holding, or sorry, this lot line out to County Road 4 was another. So 1, 2, 3. They took this property here and subdivided into your estate type residential use. 1, 2, 3 lots, 2 severed plus retained. Under this current proposed policy, that wouldn't be allowed. You would have to sever 2.5 acres, 2.5 acres, and then retain a bigger chunk of retained parcel. This was a severed parcel, severed a 2.5 acre building lot. Again, under our current reg or proposed policy, that'd be permitted. And this retained piece would function as that retained larger agricultural retained parcel. So again, this would be permitted but slightly modified. And then this proposal, yes, you'd be able to sever a 1 hectare, 2.5 acre building lot out of the corner and retain this larger landholding, which would be consistent with what is being proposed through this policy set.
So it would still be severed then.
Now, if I own one of those parcels and I want to build a house on that parcel, are you going to tell me where I can build a house on that parcel?
Thanks, Johnny. We'll keep going on analogies and hypotheticals. So, Don,
This is where I have a real problem.
this is the next set of policy at the zoning level, right? So we have an element of concern, I think, about lot creation in class 1, 2, 3 soils. And we're proposing to limit that lot creation on 1, 2, 3 soils via putting a maximum lot size on the severed parcel, which I discussed. We're also proposing to limit the as of right development area on a lot of record. So this is a lot of record that exists and can be separately conveyed at any point. If Mr. Wemp, who's asked me this question, owned this, I don't know how big it is, 2, 4, 6 hectares, so what's that, 10, 11 acres? 15 acre lot. If Mr. Wemp owned this 15 acre lot, and here's the Cataraqui Trail, and here's Robinson Road, and he wants to build this nice winding driveway and set his house in this area so that he has very close proximity to walk to the trail, and have a sort of a estate-like setting, our new policies would prohibit that. You would not be allowed to pull a building permit to do that. The reason being that the intent is that he would be forced to build in the first 50, 75 meters. I forget off the top of my head. 100 meters. It's in the policy. It's online. Basically, the intent is you have to build near the road frontage. You can't build back here and have a driveway. As we just heard, the Hudgens farm made it not farmable, if that's a word. The intent would be to limit that to this location so you could then farm this portion of the property and not fragment it via a driveway that's going to, extend 100 meters down the property. That's to your point.
Find that land on that, or is that any land in Stone Mills Township?
Any land in Stone Mills Township that's class 1 through 3 soils on that CLI map is what's proposed for public comment at this time.
Crystal Lee.
Yeah, I just want to reiterate.
I see you, Ed.
Sometimes I think people think this is going to apply to all rural land. It is not. It is only going to apply to what we currently have mapping for as prime ag, and it will only apply to that land.
Thank
So
you.
if I own a 150 acre farm, pay taxes on the 150 acre farm, and I want to build a house in the center of a maple bush, because that's where I want to build my house. You're going to tell me I can't?
If it was a maple bush, you probably could.
A maple bush would,
That would
because,
be class 7 land.
yeah, so
So this mapping is going to go on each parcel and separate the parcels?
there's going to be flexibility, and I think you'd be able to state
I
your
haven't seen
case.
that like that.
Yeah, we have to develop mapping, that's for sure. And this is still just open for comment, Don. There's nothing set in stone or even close to it at this point. That's why we're here. Go ahead, Ed.
Okay, I think we're both in agreement, like what Jason or what you. Good? I think we're both in agreement that we would like to have an agrologist, like our policy that we stated tonight and the policy that that there should be a agrologist to figure out if it's suitable to build on prime agriculture land. It's in both ours. All right. I think the thing that we're missing and that people that are not understanding, sorry, is that where we're at with this is that it's from top down. So what I'm talking about is that the provincial policy statement is the statement that forces the township to obey to putting these actions in your official plan and in your bylaws. And I just want to read this out so that everybody knows, and it may take me just a second, and sorry, read wise. So land use policy and development in the province of Ontario is directed by the province policy statement PPS, which was issued under the authority of Section 3 of the Planning Act and which came into effect of March 2005. Section 3 of the Planning Act states that decisions affecting planning matters, and this is the important part, shall be consistent with the policy statement issued under the Act. Section 2.3 of the PBS deals with specifically with agriculture policy. So that was in 2005. Jump up to today. And that provincial policy statement started in 1998. And 1998, 2005, and it kept moving forward to we have now a provincial policy statement that is issued May 1st of 2020. So again, that's what you have to adhere to, the provincial policy statement, as everybody knows. One of the things that is also in that provincial policy statement is removal of land from prime agriculture areas. So planning authorities may only exclude land from prime agriculture areas for expansion or identification of settlement areas in accordance with policy 1.138. And I won't bore you with what that all goes into, but basically you can't exclude what has happened here in 2005 or now. You have to continue to adopt prime agriculture lands, and you can't exclude lands. And what happened in 2010, excluding everything else except making that little dot there, according to provincial policy statements, this statement cannot happen.
Yes, and that's all true. And what we're dealing with is a situation where through some peculiar process back in the early 2000s, that land was de-designated. And Eric Smith, who just had to leave, provided us with a very interesting comment on that. I know that we're all trying to figure out, it's not simply that a small number of people, basically the Committee of Adjustment and someone from OMAFRA, Ray Velitis, and the township's planning consultant at the time, Glenn Tunnick, recommended those zoning changes or the de-designation of prime ag. You're quite right, Ed. It's that OMAFRA and Ministry of Municipal Affairs and Housing accepted that. And we don't know why. Supposedly there was a soil study done, but what Eric said was what the council at the time was told, and I wasn't there, but I'm sure Eric remembers, was that OMAFRA would not consider prime ag zoning in the township on anything less than, he said, 500 to 750 acres. So if that's the case, and we could check that, then no wonder most of that land was de-designated, because I can tell you there isn't a 750 acre contiguous piece of class 1, 2, and 3 land in this township.
But in fact, that's not the situation.
You have to use a mic, Ed.
Oh, in fact, that's not the situation, Reeve Wise. The fact is that you do not need acres in a block. Talking to the senior other Nancy Rutherford and other senior other in Ontario, there's no description that you need a 500 acre block to be prime ag. In fact, if you have 100 acres, if you go to a 100 acre lot, let's say, of agriculture, and if you look at the map that devised, that was first put up here. If you want to flip that for a second. But there's no designation that you need 500 acres in a block.
It's true. I
Okay.
totally agree.
So,
What I'm-
Matt, when this happened in 2010, they made an ultimate misfortunate mistake. Who did that? We don't know. But it wouldn't meet provincial policy statement. It wouldn't meet that. It was not advisable. Whoever advised it from the top, whoever advised it and whatever happened, my thoughts is that it was put in, and then when it got approved by, because if you look what I said tonight, when it got approved by the Ministry of Municipal Affairs and Housing,
They're the ultimate approval
they're
for
the
official
ultimate
plan.
approval.
Yeah.
They seen that, oh, we have prime agriculture land. We have this little block that's over here in Moscow. We have that little block. Did they walk the roads?
No, they thought
Did they
that's all there
know
was.
that They thought that
Yeah.
that's all there was. They thought that's all there was now, from 2010 to now.
Mhm.
The fact is that the provincial policy statement says each time that you make an official plan is that you need to continue to add more. You continue to have to find more. If you look across the Ontario at other counties, other municipalities, you'll see that they continue to find more. Oh, we see another 1,000 acres here that we missed. So that's the actual fact of what happened. What Eric Smith said tonight is a little bit misleading. Maybe some bit of factual to it, but the factual evidence is that the provincial policy statement is the facts that we have to use as council, have to follow, this municipality have to follow, and put that in your official plan, and then adjust that to your bylaw to be officially to what it says.
Yeah.
Shall be consistent.
Yeah, and Ed, I don't disagree with a single thing you said. Eric wasn't saying that was correct advice they got.
Right.
He's saying that's what the OMAFRA people told municipality at the time. And if you're wondering why that land got de-designated, that's why. It sounds like it's wrong. But
Correct.
in good faith, subsequent councils have based their zoning decisions on that precedent,
Well,
which
sorry.
came from the province.
Sorry, revised, but I don't know if my thoughts is that somebody didn't do their homework.
Whatever the reason.
It hasn't taken me very long in the last 6-7 months to do my homework. Somebody for 20 or 12, 13 years or longer hasn't did their homework. I'm not pointing a finger at anybody or suggesting anything. I'm just telling you that what the Ontario regs say is what I've just said.
And that's what we're trying to get to,
Okay.
is to redesignate that land. That's what the Lear study is for.
As a farmer, from my point of view, is what we need to do, because we have a large farming operation. We never got, in Newburgh, never got we didn't get
A
any
survey. I didn't get one either.
Lucky you.
Yeah.
We didn't get a survey.
No, I didn't get one.
So what we need to do is come up with something that we can all work collectively at.
Yeah, that's what we're trying to do.
To protect this farmland going forward that meets provincial policy.
Exactly.
Policy.
Yeah,
That's what we need to do. That's why I'm here tonight.
there's no disagreement.
Okay, thank you.
I think Steph was first, Crystal Lee.
I talked to Mr. Tunnick about this, and he was fired because he was standing up for prime agricultural land. And somebody didn't want it that way, and he was fired. So, oh, Mr. Tunnick told me he was fired because he was the planner at that time that was involved at that time from 2000, probably about 2005 onwards to, I think he was let go in Jacob? 2012, he was let go. I spoke to him recently, and he said he had to stand on principle about the protection of farmland, and he was upset, and he was fired. So if you go back to what Wayne was presenting before, there was definitely something sinister going on there, and it was done on purpose. And you know, the reason it's been miscategorized over all these years is because somehow that new map was slipped in there with that little, the red square in Moscow, you know, that was slipped in there somehow. And as a result of the survey and the misinterpretation of the survey results, that's how it happened. So unfortunately, we've lost our prime ag lands in the process.
Crystal Lee.
Yeah, I just wanted to share with council that I know it'd been said before, sort of that farmers aren't aware or aren't on side of this. I mean, I've pushed back against that several times. And of course, farmers aren't a unified voice. That people have diversity of thought, no matter what group you're in. But I did spend some of my weekend, it's hard, I got 2 jobs and 3 kids, but I made a basic petition and went around knocking on any door that had an OFA sign on it. And I stopped the Yarker Farmers Market. So I just made a brief petition that people are on side with us taking this with a sense of urgency. So I'll just read it to you. It's broad, but it's about urgency. I know some people are asking us to wait, but we can't lose another Galbraith farmland field or 2 or 3 or 4 of those. And so it just simply states, Stone Mills Council must act to protect prime farmland in Stone Mills Township. This is a matter of great urgency to ensure access to land for the future generation of farmers and to protect the public good. There's a future in farming for Stone Mills Township, and I'll pass it around on the on the right is all market farmers, on the left are all OFA members, and only one person did not sign, and it wasn't that he wasn't interested. He said he's very much on side with protecting farmland, but really wants to know the King Act. But every single door I went to signed this. I didn't get to every door because it's country roads, but I will pass it around so people can see the names. These aren't some people I knew before, but I went to strangers' houses. So I will, if you want to start there and just pass it around. And then and also I did find that there could be a strong consensus that people want action taken. But I also did receive an email today telling me that I guess that 20 farmers weren't good enough and I should ask 7,700 people in the township. So on my way home from work, I just stopped at McCormick's and everybody started signing up, but I only had about 10 minutes before I had to get here to this meeting. But this is an overwhelmingly popular thing that people have a deep feeling about because yes, we're struggling to pay for our housing, but people are struggling to pay for their groceries. And we are at a point now where local farmers are actually in competition with major retailers. And we need to bring back our food sovereignty, and local farmers have a major role to play in that. And we need to be looking out for the public good long term. So I just wanted to say that there is that public support there. And thank you to everyone who came out, and even all the different opinions. I think that makes us better at making decisions, but even the people that aren't in this room, there are a lot of people who are behind this as an issue. And I just really wanted to emphasize that to council.
Thank you. Did you, I think you mentioned to me in your messaging about this, because Crystal Lee was telling me about that pretty well all those people you talked to were also in favor of allowing limited severances on farm property. So this isn't an all or nothing kind of issue for most people. Yeah, that's pretty quick work. Anyone else want to add anything at this point? I'm going to have to wrap it up pretty soon. Wayne, go ahead.
Yes, and I share the opinion that the predicament that this puts developers and farmers in is incredible. So we've got a tough situation for sure. But here's the thing that could have happened. We were surprised when we find the letter from Bender, who works for Tunick. Tunick employs Bender. Tunick says he has a spreadsheet. He doesn't get that to Bender. Bender makes a chart up of responses. Bender makes a series of statements that I outlined to you that are incorrect. But when that gets sent to the approval agencies, MMAH says, what's your language like in your OP? Check. OMAFRA says, did you do a soil study? Yes. And I think that's how it happened. I think the message that went up to OMAFRA may not even been co-signed by Velitis. It may have simply been that Tunick moved it on as though it had happened as a full soil study, and we're done. We're checked off. You did your soil study, and then when they look, they say, yeah, it's got to be a big patch. Velitis moved off that after he'd arrived and began dealing with things. But when he arrived, he said 1,000 acres, and later he said 500 hectares. But that was the thinking. And then he says in another communication, but that's for southwestern Ontario. And that's where they have those gigantic patches, not here. But maybe that's part of the communication problem that happened.
It could be.
And they
yeah.
both ministries checked it off.
Yeah, it could well be. That's what
Yeah,
happened.
thank you.
Yeah. Yeah, go ahead, Quincy.
I just want to make sure I heard Councillor Woodcock's comment that you stopped at 20 residents that had the OFA.
It was more than 20. I see
Okay.
some people here. I forgot because I'm shy. I didn't give everyone the petition and more got in conversation. I was really trying to get as many people to come here so we could hear from them directly, but also just to emphasize the urgency for council to act, that many farmers are on side with us taking action. What was really surprising is how many farmers brought up the Galbraith farmland to me at the door. And they had, I don't know how to explain, but it was a deep disappointment. I would say even a sense of betrayal that we have failed on that field. And people really feel strongly that that should not happen again and again and again while we are, sitting on our hands. So.
I just want to raise the comment that, because I was privy to the emails that you're discussing about the 7,700 tax. If you stopped at every driveway that had an Oilers flag in the driveway and said used like the Oilers, well, it's going to be biased that way. But I appreciate
I'll
what the
respond
farmers
to
are.
that. People have said over and over, farmers don't want this, farmers don't want this. So I said, you know what? I'm going to go farmer to farmer to farmer, and farmers want this. Not 100% diversity. And again, they want flexibility, like John said. Where I started on this, I was a little more black and white. I get prime ag needs to be protected, but when I went door to door, you hear more of that nuance and flexibility that, if Severinsons had been allowed a long time ago, some family farms might still be in existence. Or a friend wrote to me and said, our farm is having a hard time. We're looking at severing to support the farm. And so there has to be nuance for that. But I went to farmers because I got kind of sick of hearing that they didn't want it. And I guarantee you the public is also on side.
Well,
So-
you mentioned that you stopped at McCormick's for 10 minutes. We've been here for over 2 hours discussing this. Like, this is an in-depth, there's a lot of people that are not educated on this. And I had to cram in to get into this. So we can't use absolutes where everybody is for this. Obviously, we've heard both sides tonight.
I'm not
So I
saying-
just wanted to
saying
add
it's
that.
overwhelmingly strong and clear, the support for us to take action.
I can say that I've talked to people that are overwhelmingly want this to just pump the brakes, just wait.
Okay. May I just,
No,
since we
I think
have a
that-
public
think
meeting,
this
I
is-
just thought we'd just do it.
No, I'm
show of
sorry,
hands.
Crystal Lee. This is just going to go back and forth and not be resolved.
I
There's a
apologize.
wide diversity of opinion on this. And what we're trying to do is find a middle way that will be mildly unsatisfactory to everybody. That's politics. And this will continue as a discussion. Was there anything further? If I don't pee, I'm going to float away. So I'm going to turn the chair over to Doug for a moment. And is there someone else that wishes? Yes, it's Andy. Excuse me.
Thanks, Doug. Yeah, I'd just like to say, you can look at all the maps that you want. You can draw them whatever way you want, but until you walk the ground, you don't know what it's like. Lots of farmland is fragmented by rock piles, wetlands. It doesn't show that on these maps. You really need to find a balance to allow some development, allow farming. Right now, neither one is prohibited in the rural zone. If you're going to impose a location of a dwelling to be in the corner of the lot, or you've got these sizes that if you're going to do a lot creation, it's got to be 40 hectares to be farmland. If that's the case, exempt everything that's under 40 hectares. If the house has to be within 100 meters of the road, exempt everything that's within 100 meters of the road. That way you've got it equal both ways then. That's all I've got.
Thank you, Andy. Anybody else? Go ahead.
Okay, I'm gonna have to explain something else here. So when they do a Lear study, and let's say in this map right here, what they do is as people are suggesting, and we've seen in the evidence that we got from the surveys, that some of the people said that their land at the front of it was rocky and the back was prime and blah, blah, blah. But when they do a Lear study and what this represents and what talking to the professionals that do this, they will look at the farms that are productive in the area. So in an area, they're not going to, as John Turvey says, a Lear study or prime ag land is something like Swiss cheese. It has a bunch of holes in it. So in those holes represent areas that are pockets that are not class 1, 2, and 3 farmland. And we see that as people are suggesting. But when they do a Lear study, those holes get filled in, as you see in that block that's over Centerville or those blocks. Some of that land we know is not productive farmland 1, 2, and 3. But those holes get filled in because let's say I live next to a farm. There's a few farms down the street. They've all been farmed, but I'm going to buy one of those farms. I want to purchase one of those farms. It only is 100 acres. It only has 50 acres of prime ag land on it. But I'm purchasing a farm that's going to be continued to be a farm. As Andrew kind of pointed out, there's some pasture on that. There might be some woods on that, but collectively that's a farm. So when they do a study, especially in Eastern Ontario, kind of from Cobourg to in this region, in that Lear study, collectively what they're going to do, and this study will show that those areas that people are saying, well, our farm's not all class 1, 2, and 3, you're going to see those fill in because they're not going to go down the street and start, you're not going to see those holes all over that map. There's holes in Swiss cheese, but collectively it's a block. Does everybody understand? Okay.
That's how it works.
That's how it works.
Yes, Steph.
Regarding those holes, some of them, there is starting to be a more holistic approach to farming now too, because the point is that some of those holes might be wetlands, some of them might be forests, whatever. And the reason is that they help support the farmlands by holding back water, by keeping a good water supply in the area, providing wildlife that, might have something to do with the farming. It's not that you have discrete parcels that are farm and other parcels that are not farm, and they have nothing to do with each other. It all works together. It's a symbiosis.
And those areas already have protections under other legislation, so they're not being threatened.
Yeah, and the other thing is that some of the farmland, I noticed in the research I was doing that some of the farmland is actually categorized as wetland because when you, I think it was maybe your CAO at the time was requesting from Quinte Conservation, when you have a condition where when you're mapping and it's zoned as farmland, but at the same time it's zoned as environmentally protected, which actually takes precedence on the map when you're actually performing your schedule or doing the schedule or the mapping. And they said the wetland, the environmentally protected takes precedence on the mapping over farmland. So some of that stuff you see as wetland there or environmentally protected is actually farmland. So
Yeah.
thank you.
Wenda, go ahead.
A couple of things. So I did something similar to Crystal Lee, not as many houses, but several farmers, had discussions with them about what their thoughts were on what was happening here tonight. So I just want to go over it so that I'm representing their voice here. So one farmer said he was really glad we were looking into this, and it was a very tough decision. He said he liked what Mr. Embry had to say about food insecurity, and he thought that was a really important part of the discussion, is making sure we're preserving the ability for our township to continue producing food. Another farmer, again, reiterated what a tough decision. He didn't like what happened at Galbraith's, but he knew that it was legal. And then another farmer sort of talked about that the proposal that was being put forward here tonight was a good proposal, or he said it the best it can be. That's how he worded it. And but we've been given a separate draft proposal, which I think has some value to it. Looking over it quickly, I'd like to delve over it in more detail, but I would love to see staff, as they are going to do, incorporate some of those ideas going forward. One of the things, though, I do have is a question for Nancy, because Mrs. Noyes, Gail Noyes, did suggest that Prime Ag designation was not enough, and she suggested the use of the previous rules as guidelines to classification, and to use the CLI plus the use of old records. And I just wondered what your thoughts were on that. Is that something that our staff could be doing in the interim?
Yeah. Through you, Reeve Wise, Ms. Wortman was taking notes, so let me preface that. I think your question ultimately was, Ms. Knowles' question to staff was, can we give consideration to expedite this by excluding the need to create a new zone and just default to a prime ag zone? My off-the-cuff response in assessing it for half an hour is, that's what I expect to result from a LEAR study again. If you do a LEAR study and you conclude confidently that you are accurately picking up the prime ag designated lands, you would then instill a prime ag zone onto it. And what we're proposing is an interim measure that until that mapping, to Mr. Dillon's comment, ground truthing is done, and we have validity and confirmation that it's in fact accurate, I would be reluctant on imposing such a zone standard on that type of land until that time.
Okay.
Excuse me, you can't just start talking out of turn. If you wish to address the group, you have to come to the mic. Wenda still has a comment.
Thank you. I do have one more point, but Nancy, I'd love to hear from you.
Through you, Reeve Wise, just to add on to what Jason was saying, I know because a couple of people have talked about reverting back to this previous mapping from 2000. And one piece I just don't want to get lost is, even if you wanted to do that at the local level to redesignate something prime ag, it needs to conform with the county OP. So we would need, the township would need to file a county OPA to change the county OP in order to implement that mapping in the township OP. So we're not just talking about, okay, we need to change the township OP, we also need to change the county OP. So again, there is interest in that county level, and we would need to see how that would unfold as well. So it's not just a township problem right now.
Yes, go ahead, Wenda.
Final comment that several of the farmers that I talked to, they were happy to know that, you know, they were still hopefully going to be able to create 3 lots in trying to keep their little farms, because according to the government, we have little farms here, with exception, of course. And they're seeing their children desiring to move back from urban life and have a little lot. But it was noted that they thought even the lot creation that is being proposed was even still too large, and they would be happy to even see it condensed down to like a 0.5 hectare, because they said, you know, that's a lot of grass mowing was what I heard. So I wanted to pass that along. And I know Reeve Wise alluded to the response to that, saying that it could be, was it a variant that you were suggesting, or just some studies that would have to be done to condense the lot size down further?
Yeah, you could do it 2 ways. I mean, under our existing planning regime, and correct me if I'm wrong, Jason or Nancy, if you want to sever a lot that's smaller than a hectare, you have to do a study, basically a hydro-G study, to say that the smaller lot size still can adequately support a proper septic system and so on and so forth. And you could apply that to any lot, regardless of whether we have a new farm zone or not. So something like that could be incorporated into this proposal, that you can do a smaller lot size. In fact, you should endeavor to do a smaller lot size on a rural agricultural zone. And if you can justify it, then it could be done as a smaller lot size, and that would keep even more land in a farmable situation. Steph, you had something?
Yeah, I just want to ask Nancy something. Yeah, when you mentioned the county OP, isn't it based on approving our OP? I don't use that loosely because I'm not from here, but that our OP it's okay, except it's the schedule. It's Schedule A land use that is misleading. And so they're assuming that as long as we have the right schedule, then our OP is in line with theirs. So I think it's just it's a schedule problem. It's a mapping problem. The OP is okay.
Nancy?
Through you, Reeve-wise, yes, it is a schedule problem, but the schedule is part of the official plan. And to amend the county OP schedule, we would have to file a county official plan amendment, and that would need to be in effect before the township could file or could complete their own official plan amendment of the township OP schedule.
How long would it take to refile a new schedule, Nancy?
Pardon?
How long would it take to refile a new schedule?
Through you, Reeve-wise, I can't speak to how long the county will take. We are looking at doing the county is looking at doing some boundary adjustments when they adopt their.
No, but I'm thinking, like, how long would it take us to refile a new schedule?
But the county would be the approval authority the township would file an official plan amendment with the county, and that official plan amendment is for them to amend their own OP. So we would request it, but they are the ones that have to process it. And so I can't speak to how long that would take.
So do it.
Anything further? Well, thank you very much. That was an interesting discussion, and we had a wide range of views. I'm not going to try to summarize everything. Staff will have taken all your comments, both written and verbal, and all those will be considered in any policy that we're working on. At a subsequent meeting, we'll have more decisions to make, obviously. Brandy, at this time, do you want to address the recommended motions so that you've got something to take out of this meeting?
Through you, Reeve-wise, so the recommendation on the agenda is that council receive the update respecting county council decision regarding a potential countywide land evaluation and area review study for information purposes that has yet to be addressed. And option 1, that council directs staff to consolidate the commentary received to date and report back to a future meeting for direction, or that council directs staff to consolidate the commentary received to date and bring the official planned amendment and zoning bylaw amendment policies to regulate future development of lands with class 1 through 3 soils to a future council meeting for consideration.
So those are the choices in the recommendation, and council, you're not obliged to accept simply those recommendations. You can make your own independent motion, but basically to consider these, we're being asked to decide, do we want to take all this information and comment and report back to a future meeting for direction? That means we're not committing to anything specific at this time. Or do we want staff to take that commentary and bring an official plan amendment and zoning bylaw amendment to regulate future development to a future council meeting? What is your preference in terms of a motion? Yes, Wenda.
I think I would like a little bit more time to see what's gathered in the information that staff is going to bring back to us. And on advice of a very good person, I would like to entertain the possibility of listening to or inviting a gentleman by the name of Sidney Troyster to come and speak to us. He's an expert on farmland and also on severances. And I would really enjoy the opportunity to hear a presentation from him before we would proceed with approving a recommendation for an OPA and zoning bylaw adjustment.
So basically, you're making the first motion here, that council direct staff to consolidate the commentary and report back to a future meeting for direction. Okay, is there a seconder for that motion? Doug is seconding that. Any further discussion? Well, I would disagree. I think it's time that we move on this and have some kind of official plan amendment and zoning bylaw to at least discuss. That doesn't mean we have to pass it, but it would give us something concrete to work on that incorporates the various perspectives that we've been offered this evening and previously. So having said that, does anyone else wish to comment on the motion that's on the floor?
I would strongly side with what you are suggesting.
Anyone else? Yes, Wendy.
I'm happy to withdraw my motion because I think what you're suggesting will essentially give the same thing as what I was suggesting, only one step further down the road.
And it doesn't preclude having the fellow you're talking about come to speak to us, because all we will be doing is having something concrete to discuss. He could come as a delegation to the same meeting to give us other things to consider. So the motion has been withdrawn. Someone proposing?
I will make motion that we do option number 2, or wait. Oh,
Yes, I was,
Oh,
sorry, Doug. Any comment, Doug?
I'll withdraw. I was second just to move it forward down the road rather than have it stalled. So if the other process will move it a little quicker, that's fine with me.
Thanks, Doug. Lee?
yeah, so I would make a motion that we do option number 2, direct staff to consolidate the comments and then come back and discuss further. But again, that little step ahead.
With an actual policy proposal. There's a seconder for that. When to seconds, any further discussion? All in favor? That's carried. Thank you very much. There's a hockey game starting very soon. Puck drops probably not till about quarter after. I think everyone get home in time. I would ask a motion to adjourn. Sorry. Oh, we need a confirming bylaw. Can I get a mover for confirming bylaw? Doug, seconder. Wendy, all in favor? That's carried. A motion to adjourn. Doug again, seconded by Crystal Lee, all in favor? That's carried. Thank you very much. And thanks everyone for coming.
Do you mind if I just speak about Mr. Troyster a minute here?